Portland's most respected and lowest priced office furniture dealer.
Office Furniture Direct.
Dobar dan, that means good day. Talkcast PDX on the web, talkcastpdx.com. It's Tuesday, the 24th of May, 2022. The name of the show is The Bogdanich Perspective. I'm your host, Paul Bogdanich. Welcome. Episode number 62. I'm going to call it Regime Change. As I said, Talkcast PDX. Talkcast PDX is sponsored by Office Furniture Direct, so anything to do with office furniture in the Portland metro area is Office Furniture Direct. OFDPDX.com. Go to their website, check it out, delivery, lowest prices, that kind of thing. It's the 24th of May. 24th of May is Asparagus Day. Anyway. And there's good asparagus in the markets right now. So Queen Victoria was born on May 24th in 1819. And on May 24th in 1607, the Jamestown colony was settled in the United States. The first boats came over with essentially religious convicts, but 120 people, I think, settled Jamestown in 1607. We're going to do the fun stuff first. Ran into a quote. Quote's given by a guy by the name of Gottfried Lebenz. Name rings a bell. I didn't look it up, and I can't tell you what he did, but it rings a bell. He's some kind of historical figure. It's like when Patton was the administrator of West Germany after the Second World War, there was a statue that they were arguing about, whether they should take it down or leave it up, and they had to come to him for a decision. And these people were telling him about the negative elements of the statue. And he goes, well, he says, anybody that's got a statue, he says, is some kind of son or bitch or another. So I guess that's what it takes to get a statue. But I don't know, who he is. But anyway, he said, a great doctor kills more people than a great general. And I think there may be some wisdom to that. If you could put up slide number 1, please. This is just this is as of Sunday, and this is monkeypox. All the places where monkeypox is. And just look at the map there briefly, Australia and European continent, United States, Canada. What's interesting about that is that none of those countries have any monkeys. Not a one. You can take that down. Sri Lanka, or Canary Islands, down there, has monkeys that escape from captivity, and as long as the locals are feeding them, they can survive, but there's not enough food. Had a big development in the art world. I think it's a big development. Nobody else agrees with me, but I think that I'm forward looking. In the art world, art will go through different phases. All of them are very well catalyzed. And lately you've had people like Banksy who will go to an urban setting and put up kind of like an advanced form of graffiti and, becomes a work of art. And I don't know what they call it, but it has has a name. And I think there was a development, and I think that we have a new type of art. It doesn't have a name, so I'm going to call it adaptive art. And that's where you take an object that exists, and by doing a little tweak to it, you make it come alive, or serve some artistic purpose. And if you can put up graph number 2, please. And I think this is our first real example of adaptive art. This is in Kingsland, Arkansas. It's the birthplace of Johnny Cash. Got a very small population, and it's got the Johnny Cash water tower to give water to the town. And an artist figured that he would turn said water tower into adaptive art. And if you can take that one down and put up number 2. And the artist is Timothy Sled. He's a local resident. The town authorities are just not into the arts, and they charged him with criminal mischief and impairing the operation of a public utility. When asked why they went so hard on the guy, they said, well, the town's only got, this many people in it, and it's going to cost about $10,000 to repair the water tower. You can take that graph down. And it's a tax of about $20 for every man, woman, and child in the municipality. And they're upset. So they charged him, just humorless, non-artistic people on the city council over there, I guess. Other news, this Durham investigation, which is the special prosecutor that's looking into how the FBI handled the Russiagate scandal versus the Clinton campaign and all that. And he published a bunch of stuff, which I won't go into. But in response, it's been rumored that Elon Musk has offered to purchase the FBI for $100 billion. And there's no word yet on whether Hillary Clinton's willing to sell. In other news, I got this from the Wall Street Journal. I like this. Something I learned from the Wall Street Journal. The city of New York removed its last standing payphone. The two-phone steel bank in Midtown Manhattan on 7th Avenue between 49th and 50th Street was pulled from the sidewalk and carted away to the art museum as part of a display. But it's they removed the last payphone in New York City yesterday, I guess. What else do we have here? German natural gas prices. The Russian natural gas is affecting the cost of beer bottles. The cost of a beer bottle, because they use the gas to heat the furnaces to make the glass for the beer bottles. And prices are 80% higher. It mostly affects small and medium brewers. And what's happening in Germany is a lot of your favorite beer is going away. And the only thing that you can buy is stuff like Coors or, their equivalent of Coors or Pabst or, something like that in a can. And the public is very concerned about that. That's something that gets the donkey's attention. And the chief executive of the German Brewers Federation said the situation is, quote, extremely tense. Speaking of Germany, the United States military announced a cost of living allowance reduction for all troops in Germany. They're quoting a woman who receives the funds, and she says, it fries me how they can just change how much money we get at the drop of a hat. If it was $50, I wouldn't complain, but we're talking hundreds of dollars a month. And the reason they did that is cost of living in Germany is now cheaper than in the U.S., so by law they had to reduce it. They asked the military for comment, and they said, quote, senior leaders are aware that this is poor timing for a reduction in rate and are working to determine a way forward. Most European countries, despite all the press, are paying for their natural gas in rubles. It's interesting if you look at how many American dollars it takes to buy a ruble. Prior to the invasion, for years before that, it was about 75 rubles to buy $1. Immediately after the sanctions, it went up to 140. So, it took many more rubles to buy a dollar. It's currently trading at 59. So their currency is actually appreciating, not depreciating. If you look at the same statistic in euros, European currency, prior to the crisis, it was 85. Immediately after the sanctions were applied, it went up to 145, closed Friday at 63. So Russia currently has the best performing currency in the world. Remember, TalkCast PDX, we broadcast over Google. I have to abide by the community standards, which means I'm censored, starting to interfere with things. I'm going to talk this baby food crisis. I talked about last week just a little bit, but it turns out that what happened is the FDA stopped imports because large producers quote unquote, mislabeled the nutrients in some of the ingredients. And turns out the ingredients were the sweeteners, the corn syrups. What is it? Customs and Border Protection Agency started seizing baby food from Europe, seized $162,000 of a very popular German brand because it contained what they considered mislabeled nutrients, right? So what you have is the FDA acting as a protection racket for American manufacturers, stopping all imports and all the rest of that stuff. And the situation got so far out of hand, they closed down the factory, that produced it in the United States. And then the situation got so far out of hand that it came to the public attention. Senator Rand Paul, I think of Kentucky, introduced a bill to remove tariffs on baby formula and prohibit seizing baby formula from Ireland, the Netherlands, and Germany. The bill, intends to alleviate the crisis. Speaking about the bill, he said, "My bill offers a common sense solution that will deregulate the baby formula industry, lower costs for families, and increase supply." In the House of Representatives, Representative Rosa DeLario, which is a Democrat from Connecticut, her solution is to give the FDA, the people that caused the problem, another $28 million in emergency funding so that they could inspect these foreign plants and prepare for supply chain disruptions. Guess which bill was passed? The only two things we're good at: printing money and propaganda. So they just threw the FDA an extra, they cause a problem and they get an extra $28 billion or $28 million in response. It's ridiculous. A woman by the name of Charity James on Facebook found an old magazine article or a paper article or something from 1960, the year I was born, and it listed baby formula. And the formula was 13 ounces of evaporated milk, 20 ounces of water, and in those days, 2 level tablespoons of Caro syrup, mixed, and then you put it in bottles, and there's your baby formula. And that's what they were doing the year I was born. Put that on Facebook. Facebook censored the post because, what did they say? It was the nutrient, the recipes, the standards, the nutritional standards for the recipe have not been evaluated by the governing authorities. So they censored that. And pretty outrageous. Noam Chomsky is going to die fairly soon. His work taught me a lot, about the way that they control public perception. And a lot of it has to do with words. He's a professor of linguistics. And it's kind of like, as George Carlin observed, they changed the first World War I term shell shock. And then it went from shell shock to battle fatigue to operational exhaustion. And currently we call it traumatic brain injury, all the same thing, but the direct language shell shock. In Vietnam, we changed the word search and destroy, a search and destroy mission, to quote unquote sweep and clear, that kind of thing, to make it seem like we were doing more humane things than we were. In the current era, you have these people that suggest changing woman to birthing person, that kind of thing. A guy who has a cousin, guy on the internet, who has a cousin who supposedly works as a higher up at Google. And he said that he heard from his cousin that they were in their department where they developed these community standards, that an order went out to replace any time where you used to see once upon a time. The new directive says that that's to be replaced with Ukrainian sources report. So I don't know if that's true or not, of course, but that gets to our next topic, which is this war in Ukraine. Finally figured it out. It didn't make any sense to me, and I was frustrated, and I figured it out. Graph 4, please, Justin. This is just our basic map of Ukraine. You can see the Crimea, which is under Russian control, and then these are the administrative districts of Luhansk and Donetsk, okay? And that's where they sit in Ukraine, all right? Crimea is firmly Russian, and those two are the administrative districts. 4B, please, Justin. This is a blow-up of the eastern end of the map, and within the administrative districts of Luhansk and Donetsk, you had those areas that were formerly referred to as rebel-held. those formerly rebel-held areas were collectively referred to as the DPR, or Donetsk People's Republic. All right, remember that phrase, DPR, Donetsk People's Republic, and that was the breakaway regions in the Donbass and Luhansk, two areas about the size of Texas. You can take that one down. We did a color revolution in 2014. I think it was February. I wrote the date down here somewhere. Yeah, February 23rd, 2014, we did a color revolution. The regime that we supported, or that we put in, depending on your point of view, started attacking the DPR areas. It's about the size of Texas. And for 8 years, from the 23rd of February 2014 to the 25th of February 2022, 8 years, they were killing an average of 7 people a day. A farmer working his field gets shot by snipers. A raid on a town and village, they rape and murder people, like that. Artillery shells into their largest cities, things like that. But on average, over 8 years, 7 people a day, they were killing. And then the Russians invaded in February 25th, 2022. I listened to they're not prosecuting it like a war. It's very confusing, or it was. And I was listening to the Russian side of things, that Russians with attitude, and they were just talking about a bunch of things, and they didn't present this directly, but they gave me 2 pieces of information where I can infer what's happening. And the 2 pieces of information that they gave me, they said, quote, "The Nazi narrative is Russian propaganda directed at the Russian people. It separates the evil Ukrainians from the normal Ukrainians, because otherwise it will become a different kind of war." And they said that. And then the other thing they said was, in the 1990s, people with radical nationalist ideologies from all over Eastern Europe fled to Ukraine because Ukraine had more corruption and was more lenient to people with radical nationalist ideological views. The upshot of this is, what happened is, when the Soviet Union was very weak, Vladimir Putin took over the reins of the Soviet Union, and what he tried to do is unify the nation, and he did that through a narrative of basically common genetics, common language, common culture. And everybody knew that that's what he was doing. Hillary Clinton, when they asked her about Putin, in response to that, what's he trying to do? Unify the nation by Russian people, Russian language, Russian land, Russian culture. He said he's Hitler. That was her shorthand for that program. And it's true that, Hitler did the same thing with the Volk and all that. But the intent is arguably different. But she called him Hitler for short. And then these Russian guys pointed out that this Nazi narrative is for the Russian people. All right, it's not for us. All right, it's for the it's picked up by us and it's argued by us, but it's propaganda for the Russian people. And they point out that none of these, when they said that all these crazies immigrated to Ukraine, they said Azov is just one of the quote unquote battalions. They listed about a dozen, but the major ones were Azov, Wagner, Aidar, and Tornado. All right, Azov was a political paramilitary army with a neo-Nazi culture, but were interested in controlling the defense establishment of the government. The Wagner battalion were fighters with no particular political ideology, but they liked to control territory. They were like, kind of like our American mafia, just, with their neighborhoods. The Aidar battalion had no political ideology, but they were looters, thieves. And the Tornado battalion, according to them, was full of serial killers and pedophile rapists. When we sponsored the Color Revolution, we put the Azov battalion, or the members thereof, elevated them in charge of the security services. Over the intervening 8 years, every military unit in Ukraine has like an Azov political commissar in it. And that's why this surrender at Mariupol was so important, because they captured a large number of these Azovs and kind of broke their back. there's some left to go. I'll get to that in a minute. But this Tornado Battalion, the serial killers and pedophile rapists, over the 8 years and the atrocities that they committed in the Donetsk, even, Victoria Nuland, who was in charge, had them arrested. And the Ukrainians broke them up and jailed them. And if you'll remember earlier this year when the war started, there was small articles that say that Ukraine is releasing prisoners, to fight in the war. I don't know if you saw that, but who those prisoners were that they released to go and fight in the Russian invasion was this Tornado, these members of this Tornado unit. And they did take the precaution of sprinkling them throughout the army rather than letting them operate as a cohesive force. But they did that. They released these guys from jail. Pretty interesting. If you could go to, if you can put up graph number 5, and that's how this whole thing is developed. And then Russia attacked, and they went with an attack across 1,200 miles front, roughly surrounded Kiev. But as of today, that's the map. And a couple of, the interesting things, see that little black line that looks like it's drawn in there? It is drawn in there because I drew it in. But the area in between the black line and the red area is the remainder of all the Azov forces. And that's what they're working on. About 25,000 of them to 30,000 in that area. And what they're doing is they're squeezing them out of that. And, I could never figure out how this thing worked as a military operation. And that's because it's not a military operation in the strict sense of the word. You can take that down. The way Putin's handling it, well, leave that up for a minute. I'm sorry. Put that back up or whatever. But the way Putin's handling it, it's just like Syria. He considers what we were doing with Army Ukraine and NATO and all the rest of that stuff a regime change strategy. The color revolution, changing the government in 2014, making Azov part of this, and he viewed it as a regime change strategy on our part, which arguably it was. But the way he's fighting this quote unquote war is he is doing a counter regime change war. It's not a war, it's a counter regime change police operation, much like he's doing in Syria instead. And he's using local forces. All right. All that red area that they took, the troops that did that were the DPR troops. He's using them as the fighters. He's not using Russian battalions. He augmented them with volunteers. Russia has, you can take that down, large ethnic areas with volunteers, most notably the Cossacks and the Chechens. And he took 20,000 men roughly from each of those areas. So 40,000 then. Those plus the DPR are all the troops, or most of them, other than aircraft pilots and stuff like that are operating in the DPR. And he's waging it like a counter regime change war instead of a territorial war. And that's why it's so confusing. And this thing about denazification is Russian propaganda to keep them in that mode. And what these Russian guys are saying is the denazification narrative is wearing thin. They've captured in between 7,000 and 10,000 of Azov and these other battalion troops. They're not in Russia. They're all sitting in DPR territory. The DPR people, which were being attacked and losing 7 people a day for 8 years, don't see the distinction between any of them. They want them all hung. He's, in other words, as this goes on and we pour more weapons into it, we're losing control of the situation. He's losing control of the situation. His lies are wearing thin. If you look at the military map, what's the real giveaway is he didn't push the Southern Front to take Odessa. He's leaving Ukraine with access to the Black Sea. If it was a real war, you wouldn't do that. And it's wearing thin. And the nationalists element of his country are losing patience with him. And what the nationalists in his country want, if you could put up graph number 6, is this. All right. Novorossiya. The English spelling is Novorossia. IYA, Novorossiya. It's a partition of Ukraine. It follows the voting pattern all the way since 2004 when they first had elections, all the way through the last elections they had. All those people always vote for the Russian candidate. And it is the ancient territory of what used to be called Novorossiya. And when Putin says Ukraine's not a state, that's because it wasn't. It used to be Novoros and Petros. If they do that, it causes problems. Because if you look all the way up in the extreme southwestern border of Ukraine, right, see that area that borders Slovakia, the little strip that's not labeled as Romania, and then Hungary. Historically, those territories belong to Hungary, right? So the Hungarians would like that back. If you look at the area below where it says Poland sand, a large number of those territories there in Western Ukraine are historically Polish. And, the concern is that if the Russian nationalists create a Novorossiya, that it puts all these other areas into play, we lose control. And don't think that it's impossible, by the way. You can take that down. We can't adjust the borders. Yeah, we can. All right. Immediately after the war, all the way until 1992, Czechoslovakia. Remember Czechoslovakia, British Prime Minister, peace in our time, one nation, Czechoslovakia, was split into the Czech Republic and what we now call Slovakia. In 1995, the former Yugoslavia was divided into Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, and that's it. All right. So the former Yugoslavia was divided into things. And if the Russian nationalists take charge, that's what's happened. That's what's going to happen with quote unquote Ukraine. It's going to be partitioned. The Poles are going to want their territory back. The Slovaks are going to want theirs back, and the Hungarians are going to want theirs back. And the Romanians also are going to want some of their territory back. And it'd be a hell of a colossal mess, and which is why Henry Kissinger, this morning or yesterday, it's covered in today's paper, is saying that you have to negotiate and you have to accept borders, and you have to do it now, because if this continues, the words he used is it will be perceived as an attack on the Russian nation itself, and that this is going to be the result. And what he, that's a polite way of saying that Putin's Nazi narrative to try and convince the Russian population that there's any substantial difference in between good Ukrainians and bad Ukrainians is wearing thin. And the population is increasingly showing nationalistic tendencies. So we're going to get regime change, but it's not going to be the one we wanted. It's an outrageous, and it's all Biden. Victoria Nuland and her husband, James Kagan, or Robert Kagan, whatever his name is, two neocons, Avril Haines, Samantha Power. Trump came in, they were all, they did the revolution in the last years of the Obama administration, 2014. Trump came in, didn't want anything to do with, with Russian regime change or Ukraine, fired them all. Situation sat static, weren't shipping heavy weapons to Ukraine. Biden comes in, first thing he does is puts all those people back in charge. And he's not smart enough to control them. He doesn't know what they're doing. And so they figure, all right, we got an old man in charge. We can do whatever we want. He's got a good opinion of Ukraine because his son, Hunter Biden, and Nancy Pelosi's son, and Mitt Romney's son, and John Kerry's son all have positions at Burisma, which is a large Ukrainian oil company, and they pay each of these kids of our politicians billions of dollars a year, millions of dollars a year. And then we fund the millions of dollars a year through aid to Ukraine, and on their budget it says industry support, and then it goes to Burisma, and then Burisma pays it to these people's kids, And if it was a war, Putin would have terminated that the first 2 days of the war. just to, make him know that he's serious, but he's not serious. It's not a war. He's fighting it like a counter regime change operation, like he's doing in Syria, where he's using their troops, not Russian troops. And he's leaving their governments in charge and the other government in charge, not trying to change any of the governments. And he's just trying to create, and that's how come it doesn't make any sense, And it was, I'm not saying whether I agree with it or not, but it's clear now. That's what he's doing. And he's losing control because they're tired of it and the casualties and all the rest of it. They're saying do something. And his nationalist elements are becoming more powerful, and they want a broader solution. Let's just go to the markets, check this out, how all this is affecting the markets. Go to graph number 7, please. This is just the markets, whatever, September 30th to June 30th, up and down, mostly down since March 29th. Yesterday, you'll notice, all right, Friday, April 29th, 41.32, new low. Friday, May 6th, 41.23, new low. Friday, May 13th, 40.24, new low. Friday, May 20th, last Friday, 39.01, new low. Then yesterday it went up 1.9% to 39.74. Today it's down 1.9%, back to 3,900. The trend's kind of obvious. It's making a new low every Friday. If it gets to, I think it's 38.50, it will mean that the stock market is lower than when Joe Biden was inaugurated. And there's a bunch of people that would like to see that for PR purposes on our own side. If you look at the decline last week, just from May 13th to May 20th, it went from 40.24 to 39.01. All right, that's down 3% roughly. You can take that one down. And basically what happened is the retail guys who report after all the other guys had poor earning. Well, they had good revenue, but their earnings were down because their costs were up because of inflation. And it suddenly dawned on all these money managers and retail investors and everybody else that, inflation is going to decrease retailing profits. And so the market fell, 3%. What was it? If you just had $100,000 invested, $3,050 is the expectation. If you owned the top 30 companies, you would have lost $4,250, and that's capitalization weighted. If you equal weighted them, you would have lost $3,380, and this is all compared to $3,050. If you own the top 3 in every sector, you would have only lost $2,500 instead of $3,050. Big whoop, because you would have included energy and finance, which things were up a little bit. If you just look at the list of 54 stocks, I don't even see if it's worth going into. I mean, the big losers were Cisco because they had their earnings report and, costs are up, revenues, revenue was up as expected, costs are up more than expected, profits are down. Tesla, probably on that bid to purchase the FBI for $100 billion. I don't know. Anyway, just a trading move on Tesla. Costco, Walmart, and Target. Costco lost 16.3%. Walmart lost 19.5%. Target lost 29.3% all last week. Almost a 30% cleave in your large retailers. The rest of the list reads substantially like that. The only gainers were Pfizer on this application to use to vaccinate very young children. The FDA waved it through without any vaccine advisory committee and other things. Your real estate investment trust and your oil companies went up. That's it. I don't see any way they hold this together. I really don't. The Fed is going to have to pick some level and support this market. just so that it doesn't drive everybody, all the retirees and all the guys like that, bankrupt. Maybe that number is 3,900 where it keeps bouncing off of. Maybe they let it go down to 3,000 or 3,400. I don't know, where that is. But if they weren't in there and if there was no imperative on their part to support this market, it would be a lot lower. And as these events unfold, if we keep bungling the situation, we're not going to take Kissinger's advice. He's an old man, right? What's he know? Is what they're going to say. And so we're going to keep pouring in weapons. The Russian people are going to, consider it a threat to Russia directly. Nationalists are going to become, increasingly powerful. If Putin's still in charge, he's going to be forced to accommodate these nationalist demands. If these persistent rumors about his health and cancer are correct, and he is somehow removed from power, to look out, because the regime is not going to be changed into pro-Western lovey-dovey type people. It's going to be communists and nationalists if that changes over. And I just don't see, I'm very bearish on this, on the whole market till closer to the elections. They're raising interest rates, so you can't buy bonds. So I'm real boring. Go to cash. Maybe some high quality dividend stock. Philip Morris is a high quality dividend stock, for example. Where did Philip Morris, our high quality dividend stock, do last week? I don't even know. PM, where is it? There it is. It was down 3%. It closed at 101.15. The dividend on that stock is $5 a year. So roughly, that's roughly a 5% dividend at $101. It was down from 104. It went as low during the week as like 98. I personally think that one's a good purchase anywhere under $100. As I recall, Kinder Morgan, a pipeline company, oil and gas related, has a good dividend. Lynn Corporation, which is industrial gas, has a good dividend. But a portfolio full of things like that, you'll probably lose some of the price, but you're going to make your 5% while you wait for the stocks to recover, a year, if you have a good dividend portfolio. But other than that, unless you're a quick trader, go to cash. Unless you're, somebody that's just, hitting them to make what they call price capture trades. My advice is go to cash. It's been 40 minutes. That's it. Like to keep it at 40 minutes, but that's what he's doing. I figured it out. He's fighting it not as a war. It's a regime change operation. And as I said about all wars, the things they all have in common is they all tend to expand to the point where they inflict more damage far beyond what the original war was fought over. And they're very dangerous, and we shouldn't start them. And you'd think you'd know better, but we don't have, look at our president, I mean, if he's not reading the teleprompter or has something in his ear, and that was a tremendous embarrassment. They tried to get him off the teleprompter on this trip, and they put one of these earbuds in, and he couldn't quite say what they were saying, and he kept having to repeat, like, do you want me to say this or that? And it was truly embarrassing. I mean, the guy's a disgrace. Putin might be ill with cancer. So you might have instability on that side. And between the two of them, they have 14,000 nuclear weapons. Yeah. What a bunch of geniuses we are, huh? Our political system's failing. And I just don't see, this market is, it's dead man walking. Anyway, thanks for joining Tuesday, March 24th. Bogdanich Perspective. It's a great novel. If it was a novel, if you were writing this as a novel, with all these different players and all these different pieces, it would be a great novel. It would be a real page turner, I'm telling you. Wish I could talk more about the censored content. That makes it even more interesting because it throws a whole nother dynamic into the work. But it would be a great novel. It's a real page turner. And join me next week. Let's see how it turns out. Tuesday is the Bogdanich Perspective, and do Virginia. That means goodbye.
Portland's most respected and lowest priced office furniture dealer.
Office Furniture Direct.